Hey y'all, welcome to the channel. Today we're checking out why do the British look down on Americans? I didn't know that they did.
How do you feel the British perceive Americans?
I feel like there's quite a lot of, I hate to say it, but mockery involved.
I think a lot of people think Americans are extreme.
Do you think that the British think that they're better than Americans?
I think some do, yeah.
There's a lot to make fun of, I think.
We're also fantastic at queuing as well. That's another great thing about us.
They're rubbing me the wrong way because they're too extra. It doesn't seem like it's genuine.
Today, I'm in London
Okay.
to get to the bottom of a very important question. For as long as I can remember, I have had the sense that the British look down on Americans. This is a generalization, and therefore doesn't apply to everyone, but it's a strong enough trend that I felt I needed to investigate this further.
So, I know some British people, and I've never felt that they looked down on me. Maybe they were doing it behind my back. I have, however, received some pretty negative comments on some YouTube videos. Maybe that's that. I have a British uncle, and he's not looking down. He never looks down on me.
Here's a quote from Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, that perfectly captures the feeling that I have about this. With some, the anti-American sentiment ran very hot. I was reminded of my childhood, when people warned me all the time about Americans. Too loud, too rich, too happy, too confident, too direct, too honest. I'm very curious what people are going to...
Weird. I want to read that again. Too loud, too rich, too happy, too confident, too direct, too honest. Too loud? Yes, sometimes. Too rich? Some of us, not me. Too happy? How can you be too happy? Too confident? Yeah, some of us are. Too direct? Absolutely, some of us are. Too honest? Similar thing. Yeah. When I think of a royal family member saying this, I could see how from their perspective that they would make these observations. I get it, but I'm not offended by it. I'm kind of proud of that stuff. Maybe that's part of the too confident thing. It doesn't bother me that they think this about us. I'm like, whatever. Yeah, that's us. I'm proud of it. Probably bothers Harry.
I'm very curious what people are going to have to say about this. I have a feeling I'm onto something, okay? So, having said that, let's start talking to some people. I'm shooting a video for YouTube. Could I ask you guys a question? This will be really brief. You hate it? Okay, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
Not that easy today, huh?
No, it's not. I'm wondering if I could just get a moment.
I've got too much
We're
time.
off to a very slow start. That's okay. Let's just change up the spot.
He should try speaking with a British accent, and they might actually talk to him.
That's okay. Let's just change up the spot because I'm feeling like there's enough projections in that 100-meter radius.
You know, I always feel really terrible that everyone's first attitude is, oh, you're from America, are you? Oh, okay. You know, which is always you always feel a bit bad about that because I'm not entirely sure why we still do that, but you know. It's,
How do you feel perceived as Americans by the British here in London?
A big, stupid, bellowing oaf. Yeah, genuinely. I always feel like I have to apologize for being American. It's like, I know my accent's the worst thing you'll hear today, but can I just order a coffee?
My experience, I feel like, has been a little bit different. I think that might be somewhat informed by the fact that I'm a student here.
Okay.
At first, there was a bit of a learning curve. Like, when I would speak loudly on the tube, I would kind of get looks, and people would tell me, like, you're being American, like, can you maybe not?
There's definitely sort of a sense that there is a lot of difficult things going on in America. And
There are.
America potentially
Yes.
could be quite a difficult place to live, especially if you're of colour or
Yes.
from the Middle East.
Yes.
I have to admit, the inspiration
right.
to make this video came when I moved to Europe. As I've explored in previous videos on this channel, many Europeans have mixed to negative views of Americans.
I reacted to another video of his about how Europeans view Americans, and it's a similar thing.
Many Europeans have mixed to negative views of Americans as dumb and uncultured. But to my surprise, the same goes for the British. I've come to realize that the only people that see the British as intelligent and sophisticated are the Americans. Many Europeans, like the Portuguese or the Spanish, see a very different reality. The British that go off on holiday to get extremely drunk and break things. The British that are isolationist with Brexit. The British that don't learn foreign languages, that stick to their native tongue. Wait a second, I thought to myself.
That sounds
That's
like
what Americans
us.
do. Other people do this as well?
How dare they copy us?
I can't.
Wow. So the British are the Americans of Europe. Wow. Y'all, I feel even more of a brotherly connection with my British cousins. I love you all. We're the same. We are the same. We just speak a little different. That probably bothers some British people.
Other people do this as well?
How dare they copy us?
I kid, of course. Still, it does feel like the Brits act like the Americans of Europe, but I am certain that is not something that they'd like to hear said about them. I mean, no offense. I am American after all. Does that not prove my point, though? No one wants to stoop to the level of Americans. I felt I had to get my answers directly from the source. My perception is that the UK is 1 foot in Europe, 1 foot like in the Americas. It feels like it should be in the middle of the Atlantic. Do you agree with that?
I think that's a pretty conclusive idea. But yeah, I think that's definitely true because a lot of people wouldn't even class England as being in Europe. You know, even in England, when you talk about going to Europe, no one ever thinks you mean Doncaster. They always think you mean Germany. You do get some perception that everyone's some sort of like a Valley girl accent or something like that, and I think that annoys people quite a lot. But then again, it's the same way that English people are often perceived as all sort of being from London. The American dream, making yourself better and being seen to be self-improving, and it's a lot about earning money and being the best you can and going to the gym and all these kind of things.
Do you think that's, are you saying it's positive or negative?
I think it's a positive thing for Americans, but I think the way it's perceived is often everyone goes, oh, get out of my face, you know, because they probably, no one likes to enjoy someone else's success, at least in England anyway. I think in America it's probably very different. Oh, great, you got a promotion.
Maybe.
Fucking bastard, you know.
I don't know. No, we have that envy thing here too. People will say their congratulations, but you can usually tell that they're envious of like a YouTube channel.
I think in America it's probably very different. Oh, great, you got a promotion. Fucking bastard, you know.
The identity of being American is like such a thing.
Right.
That I don't think other places have that as much.
I don't think people are necessarily dumb, and I don't think it's a question of being dumb. I think it's just that there's this idea of like, being the best. To think that like people in America, depending on where you're born, you can have access to care or not, it's frightening. And I don't know how you can speak about being the best when you can't even make sure that everybody's like taken care of. Are you treating everyone the same way in America? No, not everyone is treated the same way, just like not everyone is treated the same way in Europe.
She has a good point. There are a lot of Americans who absolutely 100% believe that America is just the greatest country ever. And I think I do believe that as well. But I'm just proud to be American. We got a lot of problems, but I think in general I love the idea of people from all different parts of the world coming together and trying to live in a community together. I think that's really, it's a noble venture, I would say. Not always successful, though.
Having been to America a lot, they often ask, obviously as a joke, but just like, do you know the royal family or anything like that?
So do you feel that generally, this big generalization, there's mockery towards the Americans and Americans towards the British? It's more like cute. We think you're cute.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah.
How do you feel about Americans thinking you're cute?
Well, it can be taken as a compliment, obviously, but if they think that we're, like, as a country, not really a force to be reckoned with, then just because we do all these, like, things that date back to long before the US was established, it's not really relevant that they can mock us for that.
Is it condescending, would you say?
A little bit.
Or ignorant?
More ignorant. It doesn't, like, hurt me.
Interesting. I don't think of Britain as cute. I think of it like an older brother or uncle, maybe a stepfather, but not like a cute little side country. Definitely a force to be reckoned with. I mean, I watched a video about the SAS. Holy crap. Do not mess with the SAS, y'all. That is a force to be reckoned with. And the Gurkhas? Don't be starting a fight with a Gurkha.
How do you feel Americans perceive the British, first of all?
They kind of look down on us.
You feel that?
I feel like Americans think like they're on the top of everything, and there's always competition between the two.
So do you feel like the British have a chip on their shoulder a little bit because of that?
Yeah, a lot.
What do you think the British are better at than Americans?
Yeah, polite, really.
More polite?
Yeah, more talkative, more helpful.
More helpful? The British are more helpful?
Yeah, than Americans. But Americans are nice, they're funny, got good music.
Got good music, okay. Well, the British have good music too, man.
Americans are taking over the music scene.
But I mean, come on, there's a lot of great British music.
My personal favorite music ever comes from Britain. The Beatles, y'all. Our modern Mozart or Beethoven comes from Britain.
So here's the thing that I think is going on here. We are not the same, the Brits and the Americans, but we sure have a lot of similarities. Compare us to the Japanese or to Native Americans or to Ethiopians, and the differences between Americans and the British seems relatively small. We're like blood siblings in the village that is the globe. So here's what all of this started to make me think of. There's a concept in psychoanalysis, I'm going to read you the definition, but it's called the narcissism of small differences. This comes from Freud. The narcissism of small differences is the idea that the more a relationship or community shares commonalities, the more likely the people in it are to engage in interpersonal feuds and mutual ridicule because of hypersensitivity to minor differences perceived in each other.
Y'all, this is happening in the comments of these videos every day. So we're similar enough that that causes us to bicker about these tiny little differences. That's fascinating. Did he say this was from Freud? Because I don't trust Freud, but I think this is brilliant.
We see this all over the world, between the Argentinians and the Chileans, for example, between the French and the Belgians. And indeed, I think this is what is happening between the Brits and the Americans. But at the end of the day, I feel like we make the little things that make us different much bigger than they really are.
I think he's right. I think he's stumbling onto something. He's smart, this guy. Yeah, this is making sense. I love his microphone.
The way that we speak and the words that we use.
Yeah.
And again, we were talking about this, weren't we?
Yeah.
About
we were
certain
talking
words.
about things like autumn versus fall. And it's like that's often something that people like bring up. And for some, well, it's because it's a simpler word. And it's like, fall, American.
You guys don't say
classic.
fall?
No, we don't say fall. We say
interesting.
autumn.
Okay.
So this is autumn.
Autumn.
But you can say autumn as well.
Yeah, we say autumn. It's not like Americans never say autumn. I even know an American girl named Autumn. Her name is Autumn.
Personally, when I come to the UK, I have the impression that I've come halfway across the Atlantic, not just off the coast of continental Europe. And by that I mean, culturally, it feels so much more similar to the life that I had in the US. The convenience of life, the speed, the capitalism, the language.
Everyone speaks English. Everyone's like got the same sort of core values. I'm not necessarily a big Christian person at all, but we all come from this like Christian-based countries. America and Australia are English. There's some things that happen in history, but at the end of the day, we're kind of all the same group of people in that regard.
I like this guy. He gets it. I agree with him.
Culturally influenced.
Culturally influenced by the same group. So I personally don't see many differences at all.
I mean, I've got wonderful American friends who I adore. So that question for me is a difficult one because I think they're great, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
I think the differences in the way our language is, in the way we use different words, that's where there's a difference.
So pretty minor.
Yeah.
Do you think that sometimes some of the British media or the portion of the British population that looks down on Americans, is it a way to deflect some of the issues that exist here? Could that be said of all societies?
Yeah, you can say that of all societies, but you can also say that about the media. They're always distracting, aren't they, from topics, whatever it is.
America's seen as very alpha male. If you think about it in terms of masculine and feminine, there's an alpha maleness to Americans. And maybe it's just the way they speak, the accent, but you don't really have that sense of Britain. I think there's a stereotype of the repressed male, that soft-spoken.
Considering we're like right on...
Well, y'all, I am not an alpha male, and I am definitely soft-spoken. Maybe I'm British.
Considering we're like right on the edge of Europe, we have more in common with America in many ways than we do with the rest of Europe, which in theory is where we should be more aligned. And I think there's sort of something that can feel sort of slightly odd about that, you know, like with the whole Brexit thing, breaking away more from where we're most closely connected to and sort of being in a situation where, you know, we're going to end up with chlorinated chicken instead.
There's this
Yeah, y'all, don't get too American over there. You don't want chlorinated chicken or vomit chocolate or cancer bread. Don't get too American.
There's this tendency to think of Americans as just, you know, they're simplistic, really.
Are you like annoyed by the Americans here in
Sometimes.
I wouldn't say
Depends how they are.
Now, the interesting thing is I love to drag the US through the mud and criticize it for all the things that I think it deserves criticism for. But the second the Brits start criticizing me or the US, you have nothing to say. Kind of like I can criticize where I grew up, but you aren't allowed to. And the British, in my opinion, are doing their version of the same thing, criticizing themselves to no end, but no one wants an outside opinion. Maybe we all do this. I think we all do this. It's like pointing at someone else's flooding house when your own house is on fire.
Yeah, don't talk smack about my grandma. Only I can talk smack about my grandma. And my cousins, they can talk smack about my grandma.
So I lived in America for 6 years. I lived in California, Alabama, and Oklahoma for 3 years. Everyone hears my accent and is like, oh, where in America are you from? I'm like, bro, I'm actually from Australia. But then they give me their little opinions on American stuff. So
he sounds American.
Play defense a couple times since I've been out here.
I hear his Australian accent poking out a little bit when he says times, Americanized Australian or something.
Are you serious?
I'm so serious. I'm so serious. They talk about guns or they talk about this, but they don't have like a very good understanding, not just English people, this is people around the world, even in Australia, of the history of America and why those things became what they were. People trying to, throw rocks in and hide their hands.
Yeah.
They don't want the blame to be on them, so it's easy to put it on the big superpower that is on everyone's TV.
That's a great point. We are the opposite of the underdog militarily, and we're always getting in everybody else's business, trying to control stuff, fixing elections, installing American-friendly dictators. A lot of horrible things. By doing all that stuff, we're leaving ourselves open for a lot of criticism. I get it.
My perception is I don't consider Americans necessarily lesser in terms of like lifestyle, culture per se. I just think it's a bit more apparent than it is in the UK, but the UK is just as problematic.
There's always sort of a sense in the past that like America was sort of, 2 decades ahead of what was happening in this country. There is a sense that we're getting closer in a time frame.
Wow, that's interesting. I never really thought about that. She's saying that culturally the UK is about 20 years behind the USA, but that the gap is narrowing?
I would say younger generations tend to be a bit more, and the only word I can think of it is shameful of the heritage. I think it's a lot of things from like colonialization and things like that. There tends to be a lot more shame around it.
We're a small island, right? So we've got a small island mentality, but because we've got a small island mentality, we've got to overcome it by kind of that impression that we're the best. And I think that's changing, though. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a total reflection of society now, but I think historically it has been, of course. Let's flip the question. How are Americans perceiving the British?
My answer to that is there is a power dynamic going on, and for better or for worse, the U.S. is much more of a world superpower right now. So I don't think that the U.S. feels threatened necessarily, like competitive with Great Britain. Because of that, I think there's kind of like they're cute. You know what I mean? Like they're Harry Potter and James Bond and sophisticated and.
They use words like autumn.
Exactly. But I also think that there's also a major degree of ignorance. Like the U.S. is so self-involved. We're not even paying attention to what's going on elsewhere in the world. So there's not even enough to form an opinion,
Yeah, y'all. I've just been watching these British culture videos for a few months now, and I've learned so much. So I can definitely say that I was much more ignorant about British culture than I am now. Not every American is watching British culture videos every day. So yeah, there's probably a lot of ignorance. Most Americans are exposed to British culture through movies like Harry Potter and all that stuff. James Bond.
Now this video was definitely supposed to be in good fun. I harbor no ill will towards the British. I find our rivalries as human beings across cultures, across nations, to be comical and interesting. It's like an insight into human psychology.
It's fun. I love it. The different words we use, the different cultural references we have, the different styles of comedy. There's a billion little differences, and it's so fascinating. It's fun.
And interesting. It's like an insight into human psychology. And despite all of the, criticizing going on here, I'd like to end on a positive note. I'd like to express my appreciation for a few things that I think the British do better than Americans. Your healthcare system, for one.
Oh, yeah.
Also, the Premier League. They say football was invented in England, and if that is true, as someone with Argentinian background, I can only thank you. I also have to thank you for your incredible music. What a contribution to our collective heritage.
Oh my God, absolutely.
It is a foreign idea to me to have a royal family, but I respect the commitment to tradition.
But I did move here.
Yes, that's what I respect about it. The whole royalty thing is like kind of weird, and like he's saying, I respect the tradition, and I think it's actually really cool that they've kept it going.
But I did move here the week that the Queen died, so it was really interesting to see I think my first impression of like the British as a public was that of like mourning for their queen, you know, the 14-hour-long line to go see her lying in state. So I think it was a little bit of a shock. This might sound silly, but how procedural the British can be. I noticed that tends to be, like every British person I've met tends to be very procedural, as opposed to Americans, I think, are a little bit more, like, dare I say, free-spirited or individualistic. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's not to say that one is better than the other.
She's nailed it. Procedural. I feel like I've been missing that word when describing British stuff. Procedural. I've heard that there's a thing about how British people will cue or form lines, and that's procedural. That makes sense. I think she's got it. While Americans are more individualistic or free-spirited. Absolutely, I totally see that. This is a smart American right here. And she lives in Britain. Come back over here. We need you.
And as a final note, we are obviously a world of individuals. And so stereotypes never fully work. Still, I find it so fascinating to explore the stereotypes and cliches that we have for one another. Not always, but often there is some sort of basis of truth there. Or else,
yes,
they wouldn't spread and persist as they do.
Right.
Anyway, having said all of that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking it, which tells the algorithms to share this with more people. I thought it was fun, and it's a format I'd love to continue exploring. And also consider subscribing so that you can see
I've already
more
subscribed.
Of the material that I make. With that, I hope to see you soon.
Great video. Awesome. Yeah. Wow. This guy, it's Nathaniel Drew. I think this is a very accurate video. Why do the British look down on Americans? Because Americans are unprocedural. That's the answer I'm going to say. I'm sure I'll hear about it in the comments that I'm wrong. I've not been reading the comments much because they're kind of mean sometimes. If you've left me a positive comment and I've not responded, I apologize. I appreciate the positivity, but there's so many negative comments that it scares me to even look at the comments sometimes. So, apologies if you've been very kind and are trying to reach out. But comments are scary. And the mean ones make me feel so bad, y'all. And I'll try to put it out of my head and just think it's not a big deal, but then throughout the rest of my day, those negative comments will just pop in my brain. And I'll think, damn, I am a dumb Yankee. Or whatever they say. It makes me feel bad. I posted a video about Brexit, and I've not checked any of the comments because I know that is a heated issue, and I'm afraid that people will say I'm just a dumb, ignorant American who has no place to talk about Brexit. I'm sure that comment is there waiting for me to read it under that video, but I'm not going to check those comments. I'm just going to know that it's there, and I want to apologize. If my comments about Brexit offended anyone or seemed ignorant or simple, I'm sure my comments were ignorant and simple. Anyway, why do the British look down on Americans? Because we make reaction videos about Brexit and we don't know what we're talking about. That's probably a big part of it. Anyway, great video, very insightful, really enjoyable too. I like watching some of these British people say more nuanced responses about Americans, and I like when they say that our Americans aren't all bad. They're actually very sweet and kind. Hey, I love the British. I love you guys. Just putting that out there. Anyway, love you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Later.